Hey guys, so I am in charge of going through the last two slides of the PowerPoint, and so this is technically what you could be working on Friday. But yeah, so we're going to go over these last two slides of the hyperdoc, and that is the European theater timeline. And you can see on this slide, you are to drag the title of the event to the little call out here, and then also put the number on top of that or next to it as well too. So, and then for the Pacific Theater, you guys are dragging the event and putting it in order. First being the first thing that happened, and the eighth thing being the eighth thing that happened. So, in order to do this, I'm going to go through this timeline with you. I created like a little slideshow to help you go through it, and you can use this as a resource to get it accomplished. Just so you know, we do not focus on this part of World War II very much in world history, so I know this is going to seem very, very, very brief over the big parts of the war during World War II. But in U.S. history, we go into all these battles in detail and talk about them and things that happen and like the movements and stuff like that. So I promise in U.S. history you will get a bigger earful about all the World War II battles. So we're going to start with that World War II in Europe timeline slide. So event number one is Operation Torch. Operation Torch, where it is on the map, that's that call out down there. You can see I put a circle around the call out that it's supposed to be labeled to, so you would drag Operation Torch to that call out, and it's also event number one, so you would drag number one over there. Operation Torch was an invasion of North Africa, and that's when the United States first got involved, was over in North Africa, and this happened in 1942. Early 1942, and we are trying to push the Germans out of North Africa and back up to Europe. And this guy over here is Erwin Rommel. So this is our invasion of North Africa. Then something to consider on the Eastern Front, that is just with the Soviets. You have the Battle of Stalingrad, which is in this call out over here. This is just one battle of the Eastern Front, but it is known as the biggest battle of the Eastern Front. And if you were to talk to anyone from Russia, they would tell you this is the turning point of World War II and not D-Day. So this is a big turning point where they fight through the city of Stalingrad. Today it's known as Volgograd because it's along the Volga River, but it's a big industrialized city. And but it is our second event that happens within our timeline, and the Russians are going to eventually surround the Germans, make the Germans surrender in a horrifying defeat, and then start making their way towards Berlin. Event number three is the Italian campaign. So once so we were over here talking about the Eastern Front. Now we're going to move back over here to the Western kind of Southern Front. And after Operation Torch, then we start to move towards the boot of Italy. So that's why we have that call out here on Italy. And you can see we're going to start moving north and liberate Italy. Because as you guys know, Mussolini was in charge of Italy, had taken over Italy in the name of fascism. And so we are liberating Italy from the fascist dictator. So that is the Italian campaign. And here's a picture of the Allies liberating Rome. You can see the Colosseum in that picture. Event number four is the turning point for the Allied powers. This is D-Day, also known as Operation Overlord. But this is when the Allied powers stormed the beaches of Normandy, France. So you can see the call out there is over on the coastline of France between England and France. You can see a couple pictures here from the D-Day invasions. We invaded several beachheads. The Americans were in charge of Utah and Omaha Beach. And if you've ever seen Saving Private Ryan, which if you haven't, wonderful war movie, I would highly suggest it. It very accurately depicts what happened at Omaha Beach, which was the bloodiest beach in the D-Day landings. But from here on out, we have now opened up the Western Front, and we are going to be moving towards Berlin. Our next event is like the last stand for Hitler, and that is known as the Battle of the Bulge. And so basically he gives everything that he can and tries to push back the Allied powers and creates a big bulge in the lines. And so you can see in this map here, like this green part is the Allies, and this is Hitler, and he advanced all the way and pushed through all the way to there. This actually happens in Belgium, in the Ardennes Forest. Very snowy, cold weather, difficult conditions to fight through. So that call out is over by Belgium. Our sixth event, almost to the end. Once they fall at the Battle of the Bulge, it's not long until the Allies will finally reach Berlin. And in the meantime, the Russians are also coming from the eastern side here. And as the Russians are coming from the east and the British and the Americans are coming from the west. Hitler knows the end is near, so he goes into his bunker in Berlin and commits suicide with his new wife, Eva Braun, and he bites down on a cyanide pill, and then also shoots himself in the head and commits suicide. So that would be the death of Hitler. Hitler is now gone, and then basically once Hitler is gone, the Americans and the Russians liberate Berlin, and the Nazis eventually surrender, and we have what is known as VE Day, Victory in Europe. You can see that's not a call out on the actual map. You just need to move it to this big call out that's at the top by the title. So that VE Day is May 8th, 1945. But that's just Victory in Europe, because there's a whole nother theater that is being fought during this war, which brings us to that second slide, which is the Pacific Theater. And we have the Pacific Theater now and going through that timeline. So even though the European Theater ends on May 8th, the Pacific Theater will take a little bit longer. So let's talk about the Pacific. How does the Pacific Theater start in the first place? Hopefully this title is familiar to you. The first thing you need to have on your timeline is the attack on Pearl Harbor, which happens December 7th, 1941. The Japanese attack the American base over in Oahu, Hawaii. And you can see a couple pictures of the Pearl Harbor attacks there. Once that happens, America then is brought into World War II. After that, we have some skirmishes over in the Pacific. I will tell you, at this point in the war, we're not heavily focusing on the Pacific. Hitler was the biggest threat, so we focus on Hitler. But you can see the second event of the Pacific Theater is the Battle of Coral Sea, which is over here by Australia because the Japanese were trying to take over New Guinea and take over the rest of New Guinea. And then if they would have gotten that, next stop would have been Australia, which would have been threatening to the British. And so we stopped the Japanese at the Battle of Coral Sea. This is the first time the Japanese actually have been stopped. They don't advance and they don't get what they want. This battle was mostly fought with aircraft carriers in 1942. Our next event is the Battle of Midway, which is also known as the turning point in the War of the Pacific. And this is a very, lots of different moving pieces to the Battle of Midway. There's also a really good movie out there about the Battle of Midway. But you can see it's over here out in the ocean. It's event number 3. And basically, it's this all attack by the Japanese on Midway. We had actually intercepted their plans, so we knew what was going to happen, and we destroyed the Japanese at Midway. They were trying to get Midway as a potential hopping point then to the coastland and to extend their presence in the Pacific. But they are not able to gain Midway. We stopped them from taking it, and the Americans and the Allied powers win the Battle of Midway. So that would be event number 3. Event number 4, after Midway, we are going to go on a campaign known as island hopping. You can see these red arrows. We are going to start to hop from island to island. The area that we start off in is over in the Solomon Islands, known as the Battle of Guadalcanal. There was an air base there and an airstrip there as well too. Very hard fought within the jungle, humid-like conditions over in Guadalcanal, over in the Solomon Islands. But we eventually do win. You can see it lasts quite a bit, August 7th to February 9th, 1942 to 1943. So that is event number 4. After we win Guadalcanal, you can see we're going to stop and get some little islands there. But the next big battle that is going to happen is the Battle of Leyte Gulf. MacArthur, our general of the Pacific Theater, is going to reclaim the Philippine Islands in the name of the Allies. And so we get the Philippines back from the Japanese in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. This is MacArthur over here. That is event number 5. Event number 6, moving on to getting landing pads for an invasion into Japan, we have the Battle of Iwo Jima. This is the first battle on Japanese territory. So this is an actual Japanese island. We are on their soil now. Very difficult fighting, lots of tunnels, stuff like that. But the Americans are successful, and the famous flag-raising picture is from the Battle of Iwo Jima. You can see the date that lasts there. It's in 1945. We want to get a little bit closer to the mainland of Japan before we have to decide what to do, and that leads us to the Battle of Okinawa, which is event number 7, which is the last big battle that we will have in the Pacific Theater, because from this spot, you can see very close island over here to Japan. We have to decide, are we going to invade the mainland, or are we going to drop a bomb? And I think you guys know what happens. In 1945, we do drop the bombs on August 6th and then August 9th, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then after the Russians then start to invade into Asia as well too, the Japanese are forced to surrender on August 15th, 1945, officially ending World War II, and we know that day as VJ Day, Victory in Japan. So you can see it lasts a little bit longer than the European theater, but the job eventually gets taken care of, and the Japanese are forced to surrender on August 15th, 1945, officially ending World War II. Like I said, you guys will learn so much more about that in U.S. history next year, but that's just a brief overview of the European theater and the Pacific theater. Have a great day.